I've been. Dreams are seeds we plant, my friend. Dusty boots, but a heart of gold. Your story's waiting to be told. Inventive journey, here we go. Through highs and lows, we let it flow. Startups rising, small but shine. Your time is now, your stars align. Cowbell ring and feel the beat. Hustle hard, don't take a seat.
Hey everyone, this is Devon Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devon Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as founder and CEO of Miller IP, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, grab some time with us to chat, and we're always here to help. Now today we've got another great guest on the podcast, Avy Schondorf. And Avy started her journey, finished high school at 16, and then took a gap year going to Israel, and then ended up staying in Israel for about 16 years, studied education and social services, and did that over a period of a decade or so of time. Then also while studying, I had 2 kids and worked and took on fundraising department of a business. And then moved to a business to do some research and marketing for doing the fundraising aspects, and also developed a love for teams and team building. And then during COVID, moved back to the U.S. and started doing a 9-to-5 job, but decided that wasn't a good fit, so decided to start her own business as well as a podcast, and she'll share a bit more about that as well. So with that much as a introduction, welcome on the podcast, Avy.
Thank you so much, Devon. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely, excited to have you here. So I just gave a quick overview to a much longer journey, so why don't we rewind and unpack that a little bit and tell us a little bit about graduating from high school a bit earlier and going off to Israel.
Yeah. So when I was in high school, I really did a lot of stuff. I bounced around a lot. It drove my parents crazy. It drove my teachers crazy. It drove everybody crazy. But I really liked doing a lot of things all at once. And when I graduated high school, like I said, I was 16 years old, which is normal for Montreal, which is where I'm from. We only have 11 grades. So at the end of 11th grade, I was 16. I took a gap year in Israel, and I was just supposed to be there for the year. But that freedom was really delicious. Not only was I there studying, but I was also living and volunteering in a group foster home. So really immersed in Israeli culture and in the social services aspect of Israeli culture. And I fell in love with these kids. They were so awesome. And that's what I wanted to do. I just wanted to work with people. I wanted to work with kids. That's all I ever wanted to do. And I told my parents, I'm going to just take one more year. I'm going to do a year of national service. And national service is the Army equivalent. Without guns. And I ended up working in a school, but also with immigrants from France to Israel. And in working with new immigrants, you're not only working in a really high stress situation, all of the kind of difficulties tend to float to the surface. And what I ended up gravitating towards again were these kind of problem kids, these who really didn't fit into a framework, who were constantly in the principal's office. Those were my favorite kids. And it was so fun teaching them because you got to be creative and stand on desks and go outside and do all sorts of things. Like, it was a challenge to keep their attention. And I found myself kind of thriving in a space where most people shrink away. They don't really know what to do with these kids. And after that, I was supposed to go back first to New York to pursue a degree in I don't know what. And then I said, okay, no, I'm going to go back to Montreal. And then I said, you know what? I'm just going to stay. And I ended up staying, like you said, in Israel for 12 years. And I fell into a lot of things. I continued working in social services, and I worked in in mental health for many years, and I got my degree in social work, which ended up taking a full decade, more than a decade, almost 15 years to get my BSW. Um, and but it was during my social work years that I fell in love with systems, and even more so with problem solving. So my first year of fieldwork training, I worked in a geriatric rehabilitation ward, and our job was to first communicate with the families and make sure that everyone knew what was going on during a very tumultuous time in their life, and also facilitate the patient's discharge back home after they've had some sort of life-altering event. And what I discovered is that people don't feel safe without a plan. You need to have a plan, and that plan kind of needs to be in writing or on paper or something tangible. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. And that uncertainty doesn't allow people to heal. It literally stops them from getting better, and it stops their families from being able to work with them. So that was really interesting, and very challenging, because I was really young at the time. Was just having my first kid. I had to do a ton of documentation and record keeping, which happens to be one of my greatest weaknesses. And my supervisor was an absolute stickler for documentation. So we would really butt heads, because I would hand in something a couple days late. For her, that was a really big deal. I don't really care so much. Like, if it's high quality, we ended up fighting a lot. Um, and I got some feedback at the end of that year that was really, really soul crushing. They sat me down and they told me, the way that you presented yourself at the beginning when we were interviewing you, and the way that you performed throughout the year, were two different people. And it, like, you almost like gaslit us into thinking that you were better than you are, which was basically the verbalization of like my greatest fear ever. Like, you're just going to tell me that to my face. And it knocked me off of my confidence for a little while. Honestly, it was true, because the person that they interviewed was 8 months pregnant, and the person that they got had had a baby 1 week before. Those are two totally different people. And we have a lot of things like that throughout our lives, where we have these kind of changes in these formative moments that happen to us. And the way that we showed up before and the way that we showed up after, we have these kind of before and after moments that change who we are. And it affects the way that people see us and the way that we present. So that was kind of another lesson. I was like, okay, clocking that, you can't really be too open and too vulnerable in these places, because the default is not necessarily going to be understanding. The default is going to be blame. And I think that a lot of us have found that throughout our careers, certainly in corporate cultures. But then my second year in fieldwork, I was able to work with criminal offenders. And that is where my heart absolutely lies. I love working with criminal offenders. It's super high stakes for them, because you're meeting with somebody who basically has an opportunity to make a change in their life or not make a change in their life. And they might be at their rock bottom, and they might not have hit their rock bottom yet, but you get to walk alongside them in their journey. I was like, okay, this is the common thread between everything I like to do. When there is somebody who is going through something, I like to be the person who journeys alongside them. And I seem to be good at this. So let's keep going and see where we end up. Simultaneously, I had to pay my bills, and I fell into nonprofit fundraising. But even in nonprofit fundraising, everything boiled down to where the person's heart is. So I'm talking to donors. I'm now selling you something without any return. The return that you get on a donation is goodwill or a good feeling, and it's notoriously a little bit difficult to sell, especially if you don't believe in it. So step number one is believe in what you're selling. But the second thing is that you have to, I completely lost my train of thought. Give me a hot second to circle back where I was coming from.
So Yeah, and then you were talking about you were getting into a lot of the fundraising aspect, and that was the way or the area that you tended to shine or to intended
I
to
found myself.
found yourself. And so, kind of, over that period of time, how long did you do that for, or kind of what
Nonprofit
over?
fundraising. All in all, I did that for about 10 years. Um, but initially when I first started, I started as the head of the nonprofit fundraising department's assistant. And 8 months in, she left to pursue her master's at Harvard. And I was the only English speaker in the organization. And they said, okay, you do everything that has to do with English now. You're going to do all of the fundraising. I was in school full time. I didn't know anything about fundraising. And we just were doing it. I worked like 15 hours a week or something like that. And I ran that entire department on 15 hours a week for 5 years. Before I left to my next organization. But what I learned was that donor interactions and donor engagement is really just about understanding their heart and understanding every individual's why. And I became kind of obsessed with this idea that everything is infinitely customizable if only we are able to systematize our effort. Right? Like it takes a lot of effort to create something that is bespoke, that is for the person specifically. But if we can figure out what the formula is to get people what they want, we can maximize the amount of people who get what they want ultimately. So I kind of became obsessed with this idea of win-win-win-win situations. And in 2020, we decided to leave Israel and move to the States. I'm not American, I'm Canadian. So it was the first time that I had lived in the United States. And I genuinely thought that US and Canada were like similar enough to that I would kind of know what was going on, but I was wrong. They are not similar places. They're completely different countries. And luckily I speak English, but that's kind of where the similarities end. And when we landed here, February 2020, I had a bunch of gigs set up to do some long distance fundraising. I had some projects and some things that I was going to be working on. My husband had transferred within his company, like we were set up and we were going to be fine. And then COVID hit. And fortunately, he was still working, but all of my plans fell through. And I can't work in the United States. So
No, and just one quick question. So, and I know you mentioned it was kind of during the COVID period, but what kind of took you've been in Israel for quite a long time, or 16 years, and even then before that you were in Canada. So, what kind of took you to the U.S. or kind of was or what led you to come here?
my sister lives in Atlanta, and that was sort of the whole thought process. If we're going to be moving, we want to be near someone. My sister lives in Atlanta. Let's go to Atlanta. Which is an overly simplified thought process and truly outrageous. But I'm a firm believer that choices are reversible. You can't go back in time, but if you made a wrong choice, then move forward and make a corrective choice. You can always move back to Israel. You can move somewhere else. And ultimately, places are just places. I've lived a lot of places. In a lot of cities and had a lot of groups of friends and reinvented myself a lot of times. And the core of who you are is what's going to direct everything that's around you, no matter where you live.
Makes sense. So now, I jumped in, but to follow up now, you said so you came in here, you kind of had it sound like a little bit of a plan as far as what you might do, or kind of the job that you might do, and that fell through, it didn't work out. So maybe catch us up or walk us through kind of how that as you came into the U.S. or came to the States, what you decided to do.
So then I didn't have a work permit because I'm not American. My husband was working, thank God, but all of my carefully set up plans to work in Israel while living in the US did not work out because of COVID. And then I started doing pretty much everything. I was like, okay, what are my skills? What can I do? How can we make money? And I don't want the IRS to come for me or anything, but I speak Hebrew. So I taught Hebrew lessons to kids who were in lockdown and weren't in school. I have a strategic mind. So I started consulting with businesses, with startup businesses for equity on the back end. And I built, I think, 7 businesses on the back end during COVID, just to try and get some money in the door. I learned how to coupon. I became one of those crazy extreme couponing ladies. I worked as an assistant for a production company and an assistant running a Kickstarter campaign for like a magnetic toy company. I just did literally anything and everything that I could possibly think of, and anything that anyone would pay me for. Until my brother-in-law opened up a COVID testing company in Georgia. And when he opened his COVID testing company, he blew up. They were so busy. They were completely slammed. And after Thanksgiving, they had a customer service crisis. Everyone was furious. All the labs were backed up. But that first Thanksgiving of 2020, tests were taking forever. And they had this customer service team based in the Philippines, but like they didn't have enough time to figure out what was going on or to manage them properly. And my brother-in-law asked me, can you please come on and oversee this team of people? And I did, of course, and immediately recognized that all they were missing was a solid middle management structure and systems. If they had a solid middle management structure and systems, they wouldn't need me at all. So my goal became to build out their middle management structure and their systems so I could build myself out of a job. And then I realized that's a really bad idea for me, but a really interesting business model for other people. Especially when you pair that with the global workforce and outsourcing to the Philippines. So I went to the Filipino team within my brother-in-law's company and I said, guys, I want to start a virtual assistant agency. What do you think? What do I need to do to be the best VA agency possible? Because the thought process was, if I can attract the best people, then clients come. I mean, it's going to take some time to build the business as it is, especially because it's a startup. Our model is quite different. It's kind of complex and weird. So we jumped in and we started building that. And it's rough. Building a startup from nothing with no seed funding means that by definition, you're going to be chasing your tail for the foreseeable future. And if you have a really strong vision, then sometimes it's okay. But if not, like you really need to white knuckle your way through it. Like we're buckling in now for the long haul, and it's going to be really, really bumpy. So we started offering virtual assistant services, and we started offering a little bit of this and a little bit of that. There were certain things that I was adamant about. I was not going to outsource individuals by placing them in other people's companies because I couldn't vouch for the companies and I couldn't vouch for the individual's output. So that wasn't something that I wanted to do, which means that by definition, I just eliminated my most scalable way of making income. If you're going to be a virtual assistant agency, the way to make scalable income is to place people in other businesses. But I wasn't going to do that. So now I had to figure out what problem it was that I am solving. And everybody kept telling me to simplify. I needed to simplify and simplify and simplify. And on the one hand, they were really right, but the application was incorrect. I didn't need to simplify the model. I needed to niche down into who the model was for. And it took 2.5 years of collecting data to realize that every single one of our clients is neurodivergent. They have ADHD, they have autism, they have OCD, dyslexia, something. Throughout this, I had also gotten my own ADHD diagnosis and became a little bit obsessed with ADHD and the way it presents. And then I looked back at my entire career and I realized that ADHD has been following me forever. The boys, those little boys that nobody can handle, that would get kicked out of class and we would need to stand on the tables to to get some knowledge in their head definitely had of ADHD. And the criminal offenders also huge high prevalence of ADHD among criminal offenders because there's a lot of acting out, there's a lot of aggression, there's a lot of external displays of behavior with ADHD, especially if you don't have that sort of control. And once I realized that, awesome. Because it became like a space for people who have been told that they need to simplify their whole lives, that you need to do less, that you need to streamline, that you need to simplify, that you need to focus, that you need to calm down, whatever that version is that you were told your whole life, that lesson that you were too much. I was able to build a space that can absorb that. And it's been so cool.
So now that, no, definitely a great walkthrough. Sounds like it, a good evolution, kind of finally settled on really where you fit and kind of what would line up with your skills and your, the direction you wanted to go. So now, when did you just kind of start really the main business, which is, that, or what you just alluded to that you're continuing to do today? What time frame did that start?
So we started Alisto beginning of 2022. And then we launched the AVHD podcast. It's been a year now. We just came up on a year.
Awesome. So now, over that course of that kind of that 3 year or so period of getting the business up going, kind of walks through how it's evolved, or kind of or where is it at today?
Yeah. So our main focus was the team structure and the system. And I built out my business in possibly the stupidest way that anyone could build out a business. Because I really was stubborn. To be very, very frank, I was super stubborn and I wanted to build things the way that I wanted to build them. Throughout, I realized that I was building things really stupid. And I made the conscious decision to continue that way because I figured that's probably what most people with their first startup experience. So if I want to be able to plug systems in and to understand the entrepreneur at the various phases of evolution in their business, then I need to build it out the stupid way. That's not advice. That's not advice I would give anyone ever. If you can take a shortcut, you should take a shortcut. But every single one of my clients from that point has the same tendencies to learn by trial and error, to learn by fire. They really want to jump in and get their hands dirty. They like making mistakes. It's the way that they learn, which is a very neurodivergent thing. We just kind of, especially if you have ADHD, we kind of jump in and we like to get in with both of our hands. But we evolved from offering exclusively full teams where there are 5 people working on your business at any given time, to offering much more simplified virtual assistant services. We then had a business strategist who came in who was from the corporate world. So he really tried to push us in the direction of corporate teams, which was kind of interesting, and the structure fit, but the culture wasn't a really good fit. From there, we came back and really settled on that neurodivergent angle, at which point we understood that the likelihood of a high buy-in was very slim because we're not the trusting type. So we needed to create micro packages and niche everything super, super, super down and make like 1,000 different potential entry points for the ADHD entrepreneur that will meet them kind of exactly where they're at. And in doing that, we just created content throughout, and everything that we learned became a lesson, and any client that we had became a lesson. And that's where we're at now with those
awesome.
multiple entry points that really gives us a wide funnel.
No, that sounds great. Sounds like it's been a fun evolution and a lot of good success. So now as we've kind of caught up today as far as kind of where things are at and kind of how we got to where, or how you got to where you're at today, always a great time to transition to the two questions I always like to ask towards the end of each episode. So we'll jump to those now. So the first question I'd like to ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made? What did you learn from it?
There's so many bad decisions. The worst business decision I ever made was not charging for my work. You can kind of get away with not charging for your expertise, or like a consult call. But if you're ever going to be delivering something, you really, really, really need to charge. Because no matter what, and no matter how much a person on the receiving end of that says that they value your contribution, that's not the way that value works in our capitalist society. And for these purposes, I'm an individual and I'm an entrepreneur and I'm a person, but right now I'm a business. And a business that is providing output without receiving payment is a failure.
No, makes perfect sense.
Yeah, that was a hard one. I had to learn that one a few times.
So now to follow that up there with the second question, which is, so now if you're talking with somebody that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what would be the one rule of thumb that you'd recommend?
Strap in. Don't quit your 9 to 5. I would say that you likely have a really great idea and there's likely a lot of potential. If you're starting out on your own, like I am, and not with partners and not with seed funding and not with a background or a network, you're really kind of starting from square one. Don't quit your job. You can build things out slowly and properly, or you could put yourself in a situation where you're really drowning. That's what I would say to the solopreneur who's starting from super square one.
No, that's a good takeaway. It's a hard one where you get something excited about it, you want to go all in, and it makes sense that, in one sense you can justify just making the leap, and, you kind of think that's the only way it can be successful, and yet oftentimes you kind of put yourself in a situation to where if it does need more time, or there does need to be evolutions, or needs to maturate, or otherwise, evolve, and if you don't have enough runway, then it could have been successful, but it doesn't have that runway in order to reach that point of success. So I think that's a great rule of thumb as a takeaway. Well, now as we do wrap up towards the end of the episode, if people want to reach out to you, they want to be a customer, they want to be a client, they want to be an employee, they want to be an investor, they want to be your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out to you, contact you, find out more?
Yeah, absolutely. I love new best friends. You can find us across the internet at Alisto VA. It's ALISTOVA.com. And on all socials. For the podcast or to work with me personally, you can find me at avhd.com. It's AVYHD and AVHD across all social platforms.
Awesome. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, support a great business, expand your network, and nothing else, make a new best friend. So with that, thank you again for coming on the podcast. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners are out there, if you have your own journey to share and you'd like to be a guest on the podcast, we'd love to have you. So just go to inventiveunicorn.com, apply to be on the show. A couple more things as listeners. Make sure to click share, subscribe, leave us a review. Helps us to reach even more startups and small businesses along their journey to success. And along that note, if along your journey you ever need help with patents or trademarks or anything else with your startup or your small business, feel free to reach out to us and go to strategymeeting.com. Well, thank you again, Avy, for coming on the podcast, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you so much.
We'd plant, my friend. Dusty boots, but a heart of gold. Your story's waiting to be told. Inventive journey, here we go. Through highs and lows, we let it flow. Startups rising, small be shine. Your time is now, your stars align. Cowbell ring and feel the beat. Hustle hard, don't take a seat. Every step you're blazing trail. Inventive journey never fails.